Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, and we're diving straight into a topic that the industry loves to discuss: video game studio acquisitions. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, we're in a time that's very special for gaming because studios are selling out everywhere, and on top of that, we're entering more of a digital-only, subscription service-based gaming format. And this is going to be an interesting conversation because we can look at this video even a year or two from now, let alone 5 years, and look at where the industry once was, how we were feeling about certain things, and how drastically I personally expect it to transform. It could be really interesting to reflect on, so I wanted to make it today because we've seen two brand new studio acquisitions happen, and they're happening so often and so frequently that they're almost flying under the radar. People going, whatever. And I think that's a sign of the times. So we're going to dive straight into it. If you're new here and you want to talk about the latest and greatest in gaming, consider subscribing. But now let's dive into it. So of course, late last year, we get Xbox and Bethesda teaming up, the biggest acquisition we've ever seen in gaming. But that wasn't the start of video game acquisitions. You go back a couple years before that, you see Xbox buying out Ninja Theory, Double Fine, etc., etc. They get Obsidian, inXile, PlayStation buys Insomniac. We were seeing a slow and steady build-up, but I think Xbox acquiring Bethesda really blew down the floodgates. And after that, we saw the likes of Gearbox being purchased by the Embracer Group. We had Embracer Group acquiring Aspire Media, who's now working on Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic Remake, which is an exclusive deal with PlayStation. So there's just deals being bridged everywhere, because I think what's happening is companies are seeing really big corporations come in and say, hey, we have the money. You don't got to worry about anything but making your game. We'll provide what you need. Just make it for us and generate us some revenue, and you're good to go. And you've got creatives sitting there going, wait, this is what I've always wanted. Furthermore, you've got situations like PlayStation embracing Housemarque into their family. They also acquired PC port developer Nix's software. They bought Evo recently. Hell, even Nintendo smelled the blood in the water and got Next Level Games at the beginning of this year, who was working on Luigi's Mansion. PlayStation especially, I think, was most sparked by Xbox's move with Bethesda because while all acquisitions are not reactionary, I'm sure they're now a little bit more keen on locking down studios that they plan on working long-term with. And we're going to be talking about PlayStation again because they made another acquisition, and I salute them for their aggressiveness and playing the game smart. Where Xbox went in and just absorbed an entire publisher, PlayStation's making more targeted attacks, kind of like an assassin, and I like what they're doing. They're very fun to watch. But before we get into today's news that really sparked this conversation, I think we do need to talk about and establish, are acquisitions good or bad? Now, I think the obviously good one of it all is when you get someone like Xbox or PlayStation involved. There's a lot of money that's being put into these games, into these studios. You get more financial security, less layoffs in our industry, which in turn is obviously just job security, which was actually very uncommon earlier in the games industry. So that's very much being embraced nowadays, that people's jobs can be protected. Of course, you can start to make the games you truly want without the worry of, will this sell well? And then you bring in the digital format with things like Game Pass. And of course, we're going to talk about how that could expand even more so, where it's becoming less about sales and more about player count. But I don't think Xbox is going to be the only one with a subscription service for gaming that is going to update its catalog via studios that they have acquired. Netflix is now involved. Like I said, everyone's making studio purchases, and they made what I thought was a pretty interesting one. So this article comes from VentureBeat, which is titled, Netflix acquires its first game studio in deal with Oxenfree creator Night School Studio. Of course, it's a surreal honor to be the first game studio to join Netflix. Not only do we get to keep doing what we do, how we like to do it, but we get a front row seat on the biggest entertainment platform in the world. The Netflix team has shown the utmost care for protecting our studio culture and creative vision. We'll keep making Oxenfree 2. We'll keep cooking up new game worlds. Of course, Netflix, sort of what I would view as the pioneer for delivering digital subscription-based content, getting involved in gaming, and now they've acquired a studio. I can only imagine that they're going to keep buying studios, smaller ones at that, to build up their library and offer some type of Netflix game subscription service, or add it as a part of the current Netflix subscription service instead of charging you for a separate one. But still, you know they're going to get involved, and they're certainly not going to be the only one. I think PlayStation is going to evolve PlayStation Now even further. And if you don't think we're going to enter this more subscription service-filled era of the industry, you're kidding yourself, because look at how well Xbox is doing, and they're miles ahead of everyone, where I think they will remain head of the pack. But regardless of all that, there are going to be a lot of companies following in the path that they have trailblazed. As a physical game collector, I find that sort of upsetting, because eventually I do think we're going to get to the point where these studios have been acquired so much and they're all part of some type of subscription service that you're likely going to see less boxed releases as the internet progresses and better internet reaches various areas of the world. But I also mentioned a PlayStation acquisition. I want to dive into that as well to round out this conversation. So let's keep going. PlayStation Studios acquires Manchester-based Fabric Games. Now, at face value, this actually looks like not the biggest acquisition for them, but the way that they have acquired this talent and who it is kind of like a major first-party addition in my eyes. Firesprite, the large Liverpool-based team bought by PlayStation earlier this month, has expanded further with the acquisition of Fabric Games. Fabric will now become part of Firesprite and boost its overall headcount to 265. Firesprite was formed from the remnants of Sony Liverpool, which PlayStation shut down back in 2012. Now it has quietly grown to become one of the largest development teams in the UK and has found itself back as a first-party studio. Quote, "I'm delighted to announce that we will be bringing Fabric Games and Firesprite together as part of our exciting next step with PlayStation Studios," end quote. Firesprite boss Graham Anchors said today. Quote, "They are a team of passionate and committed developers led by industry veterans who have worked on many AAA franchises. We're looking forward to bolstering our creative talent as we continue on our journey to offer truly unique experiences for PlayStation fans," end quote. So a studio that PlayStation effectively shut down, a first-party one that went off and did their own thing, has now come back, and we've sort of seen an acquisition within an acquisition, which I feel almost opens the door to the idea of, hey, what if ZeniMax had made their own acquisition, which in turn would bring a company into the fold beneath Xbox. But see, that's what's starting to happen now. There's umbrellas and then mini umbrellas and then another umbrella beneath it, where we're starting to see acquisition season is real. And again, it's happening more rapidly than ever. I just told you about two. These were in the last 2 days. All of these acquisitions I've talked about outside of Bethesda, which technically was announced late last year, but the acquisition happened this year. The rest of the acquisitions, all in 2021. Because we're seeing that a lot of companies are willing to pay. Companies are willing to secure the bag, by the way, give their employees job security. But the unfortunate reality is, eventually we can start to see all these developers underneath, I mean, I'd say like 5 umbrellas, which sucks ultimately, but I also understand it. I don't hate exclusives. I think there's a reason for it. I think there's a purpose for it, and it makes your platform more competitive. But now we've taken this extra step forward where it's gone from third-party exclusives of buying out games entirely to just outright buying out studios and the talent that's there. I think Phil Spencer's thoughts on acquisitions is quite interesting and relevant to this conversation. I've covered this on the channel before, but I want to read it one more time. Quote, "Sometimes I see dialogue out in the industry about, well, are acquisitions a good thing or a bad thing? And I saw Sony just announced a couple of acquisitions, saying congrats to those teams on that. And I understand some of the sentiment from the community about whether these are a good thing or a bad thing when acquisitions happen," end quote, Spencer said. Quote, "But one thing I'll put out there is starting a new studio, starting any small business, frankly, is a very risky proposition. Starting a video game studio is even more so. And if a team actually takes the risk of starting a new company, starting a studio, building that over years, building value in that, to say that they shouldn't sell, I think is just short-sighted. It doesn't mean that every team has to end up selling their studio, but I think it is a natural and healthy part of our industry that certain teams will start a studio. Many of them will fail. We know most small businesses fail, whether it's video games or anything else, but those that make it through at such a kind of risk-filled journey for them to get to the point to create real value, I'm always going to congratulate when teams get to the point where they realize that value through acquisition or just massive independent success, if that's the path they also start on," end quote, Spencer continued. Now, I think this is actually a pretty healthy take if you're a businessman. You know, if you know about the ins and outs of the industry. What he's saying is not wrong. I don't think it's incorrect. I don't think it's a bad take at all. But what I find interesting here is that this is only a take that can relate to people deeply involved in the business and doesn't really have much consideration, I would say, for the consumer, because we're the ones who have to make the decision now about multiple consoles, and that console war has just heated up more and more, where I would say I've been pretty console agnostic in the sense of I try to just embrace every game imaginable that I am into. And even I get swept up into it with just like, hey, look at this cool thing I saw in Halo. And it's like, oh, God, you idiot. You like that? That's stupid. Screw you, Xbox. It's like, okay, geez, I just thought that this thing from Halo was pretty cool. So it's gotten more and more venomous. And that's only with pieces of plastic in the mix, let alone when we start to see more subscription services from all of these companies where, yes, the acquisitions and the realization of value is very important for those who are establishing these businesses and making these games for us, but it's not considering the actual decision making that consumers have to go through and how that will expand over time. So really what this video was geared to do was take an overall look at acquisitions, but now I want to sort of put a pin on what I think is going to happen in a couple of years. I think, of course, we know that Xbox is invested in getting more studios under its umbrella, and as we enter this subscription service-based journey, more and more, I think you're going to see studios just get picked off the market. I don't know if it'll be on the level of full publishers, but I think we're going to start to see almost a sports trading-like environment where we've heard speculation, and only speculation of this, that Xbox may extract Crystal Dynamics from Square Enix. Not buy Square Enix outright, but take one of their studios from them. And I think that angle is really interesting. It's something I suggested a while ago, which is that I think you're going to start to see more targeted, precise attacks rather than let's just get the whole brand underneath our umbrella. If you could get that for the right price, sure. But over time, you're going to see more and more talent offloaded to other companies, and they're all going to fall under a set of 5 to 10 umbrellas. And yeah, that'll be a little troublesome for consumers for sure. And I can see it getting frustrating. For me, I don't watch much TV. I just don't engage with it as deeply as others. I still do watch it from time to time, whether it just be anime most times, but also the occasional normal person show, I guess we can call it. But what drove me away from it was that all of it was delivered through subscription models, and they broke it up, or sometimes they dropped the whole season at once and people would spoil it right away. And there was just something I felt was lost in that. And I always went to games mostly because of my ability to interact with the story and the characters in the world, and I got much more deeply invested in it because of all that, and that will never go away. But it was also that things were told in a complete manner. And I just worry as we move more and more into this subscription-filled era in gaming that we start to see kind of like we saw with Life is Strange and a lot of other these Telltale games, and of course what happened with Final Fantasy VII Remake, where yes, 7 Remake was a full game, but it's broken up into 3 parts from the get-go, and there is no attempt to tell the complete tale, and companies will continue to sell us these bite-sized pieces. I understand that with games being more and more expensive to make, that the risk-taking is lowering more and more, and that's why I think you're going to see indies just explode over the next half a decade. But I digress. It's just going to be a very interesting time where I think some people are going to drift more into retro gaming. I really do think that is going to be a major factor in all of this. It's one of the main reasons I set up a retro gaming channel, was not only am I very passionate about it and love it, but that is what started all. That's the type of gaming I love, you know, the physical stuff. I like putting the disc in the console, those little things there, having the item in my hand, experiencing something in full, a complete vision, of course the video game manual. Those things really, to me, are a part of the overall experience, and I genuinely see if we continue down this subscription-based route, we're still going to get fantastic games, but I also feel like some people are going to fall off of modern gaming and go back to older consoles and just experience what they liked best about gaming. So anyway, just wanted to have a nice talk here about video game acquisitions, because there have been a lot of them throughout this whole year. There were 2 more in the last 24 hours, and I'm sure we'll see more before the year ends. So let me know what you're thinking and what's your overall feel on where video game acquisitions are going. Let me know in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.